So, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, based upon wherever you're joining us from today. So, my name is Vignesh. So, I'm the chief organizer of the Microsoft 365 Power Platform and Cloud Security India UG, and I'll also be the moderator for today's session. So this is the very first session that we have on the Azure Sentinel Zero to Hero webinar series. And today, Samik Roy, who's a lead developer in open systems, will be joining us to discuss about how to get started with Azure Sentinel. So as I said, this is a series. So this is the very first session, and we have multiple sessions planned under the series. So if you're somebody who's interested in learning Azure Sentinel, and if you are looking to get into a career on the sim side of the house, so this would be the a right place to start. So moving on. So these are some session guidelines, basically something which we stick to in our events. So the planned duration for this webinar is 60 minutes, and it might get extended based on the questions we get during the session. So you can roughly think from 60 to maybe 75 to 90 minutes based upon the questions and whatever demo the speaker has planned. So questions, it's good that you have questions. So it's better to keep posting your questions on the chat window as the session progresses. But say, for instance, if that is a very specific question which you want to unmute yourself and ask, we would recommend that please hold it on towards the end so that the speaker can finish his session and then you can unmute and ask the question. So I'll be announcing the time for the Q&A. So that would be the right time for you to ask your questions. So yes, this webinar is being recorded and we'll be posting the recording on my YouTube channel. That's the URL for the YouTube channel. And if you're not already a member of our meetup group, so please do make sure that you join our meetup group so that you don't get. There is a lot of good things that we are planning and we don't want you to miss it. So with that, I'll stop and let me hand over the floor to Samik. Samik, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vignesh, and thank you to the group for giving me this opportunity and this evening. And again, good morning, afternoon, evening to all of you, based on the time you are in, right? So myself, as Vignesh mentioned, I'm Samik Roy, and I basically work as a lead developer in a company called Open Systems, which is purely focused on Microsoft securities. And today will be the first session of our Zero to Hero Azure Sentinel series, and today for basically what we'll try to do is again three things: why we need Azure Sentinel, basically a quick walkthrough of the tool, and a little bit of comparison between the traditional SIEM model and SIEM systems and what addition it has rather than the others. And we will end it up by Q&As, and then we'll also look at some resources which you all can leverage to and engage ourselves in learning Sentinel more and more. So with that, let me share my screen, and it would be great if you could confirm once you see my screen.
Yeah, we can see your screen, Samik.
Thanks. Yeah, so as I said, I'll just going to skip the introductory slide because that's what I mentioned. So, and the agenda, as I said, is morely 3+1. It's like why we need Azure Sentinel and just a little walkthrough of it. And then we will have question Q&As and discussions based on the questions you have, and also look at what's next and how we can get ourselves engaged more with Sentinel. Right. So why Azure Sentinel? So as the name says, right, Azure Sentinel is a SaaS-based product which Microsoft offers in terms of security, and which is like, as Microsoft promises, it's going to be your single pane of glass for from your every security aspect. Like as Microsoft has many other security product in their E5 or E3 stack, right? So Sentinel is gonna be the pivotal point where we bring up everything we have only in my not only in Microsoft ecosystem. It's also something in AWS, something which is in Google, right? So for example, if you have VMs in Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services, we have Azure Arc to onboard them into Sentinel. So basically it's a holistic solution which Microsoft offers for you to be in the same one, and then basically monitor all things together in a single pane of glass, right? And it doesn't only stop there. If we just try to look at some of the traditional SIEM system, maybe ArcSight or maybe Splunk, right? So they are like, they have the traditional relation system, and then the most thing you have to do is like you have to pay for the setup, and then you have to do a lot of infra setup. so to run those SIEMs, which is traditionally used in a lot of organization as of today, right? But with SIEM, uh, Azure Sentinel, you don't have to worry about that. All you need to do is just plug and play your data sources, and that's where you go. So that's like basically gives a threat hunter very better experience, and the turnaround time to set up your SIEM, right, goes lesser, and so on your operational cost. So that's like a turn on for Azure Sentinel. So that's being the first point. Microsoft also extend this Azure Sentinel to be for free for the first month, right? So that we can all try and do our POC without impacting or tampering our existing SIEM system. So once we get a hint and then get a knowledge about it, we will be going to we'll be having the decision that why should we lean towards Azure Sentinel. So that's basically we have why we have, and we'll just in a short while we jump onto the tool and look at how easily it is available for navigation and how quickly it is accessible from everywhere in the world because it's inside Azure, right? So just to add to the introduction, right? So as I say, in today's connected world, if we look at the data frame we have or the data sources we have smart cities planned in, we have energy ecosystem, we have sensors, we have like Microsoft and the partners data, and then we have Sentinel developer coming in doing our development, we have on-premises data sources, we have mobile data sources, which is all on the fly. We also have some big systems like supply chain, we have manufacturing data, and also we have like equipment data, right? So with this data being huge, right, so the biggest challenge is to make sure a single product can stand by the volume of this sources generate. For example, if we look at a sensor, right, we talk about IoT. So IoT sensor generates data in bulk, which is really high in scale and volume. And Microsoft Sentinel is one of the tool which let you easily ingest, right, all those logs as and maybe another example can be, we have Cisco appliances, for example, or any other network appliances, maybe Palo Alto or something, right? So, or maybe you have Zscaler for your network and proxies. So all those things are generating logs for every hit we do, right? But with Sentinel in place, it's very easy, which I'm going to also show you like in a little bit of short demo how we ingest log and how easy it is to bring it up to Sentinel, and it's all there. So the benefit of all data being there, the first thing is it's our liberty to have the data in one place so that we can query in the way we want to, and we can slice and dice the data. That's and Not only that, on top of that, Microsoft keeps on investing and on the machine learning behind our data sets. So what happens over the time, if we take an example of Azure Active Directory identity protection, so it basically protects the identity, right? That is a product itself, which comes with Azure AD P2 license, right? So if we have that, and then if we have that in Sentinel, right, so what happens behind the scene, Sentinel runs a machine learning algorithm behind the scene, and then that's learns based on our responses. For example, there's an alert on my account because I might be logging in from a different location, but I'm in the same city maybe. So things happen that initially, when you deploy Sentinel, we might need to go through a lot of learning process, but beyond the line, or maybe down the line 6 months or maybe 8 months, right, once the machine learning model gets matured, right, so we have a full-fledged SIM helping us like a firewall, blocking most of the threats with we doing nothing about it. So that's about the introduction. So with this, I'll take a quick pause and then wait for if you have any questions. Well, so I take that as a no, and let us go to the next slide we have. So now, as a part of why Sentinel, right? So if you look at, there's a very simple graph or very simple circle we have in terms of investigating data through Sentinel, right? It is not only in Sentinel, it's also, basically on a security aspect of any Microsoft landscape as well as non-Microsoft cloud providers or on-prem providers, right? So initially, as a part of investigation or as a part of security insights or analytics, what we do is we collect the data, and when we say data collection, we don't leave anything So we just get everything for wherever possible so that we have much evidence, and then we have the base of the data to be there for us to query so that I can get results. So once we do that, right, we just try to iterate the data throughout the KQL queries, and we have workbooks to see at the visual, and finally we try to detect a pattern or a threat, right? And also this is one thing, in organizations we have SOC team doing the same detection, but Microsoft also in parallel keeps investing on the huge data sets that the machine learning model that helps and understand the data sets itself, and then that only will let you know with the suggestions that this is the anomaly you see. For one example can be, right? So for example, your office activity. So let's say in your SharePoint or your email, right? One sudden day you see a high mail flow, right? Very high mail flow from a particular account. So there are configurations, or Microsoft has the intelligence built in, which will let you know, okay, this is the place you should look at, and maybe this is the user who is generating the spam. So something like that. So the second step being detect, right? So that basically surfaces the meaningful information, I would say, the alert with the evidence, what we need to understand where the threat is coming from, or what it means, right? So I'll just take a pause and see. So yeah, Saurabh, so you can go ahead and then.
Yeah, Samik, if you can just explain the firewall example which you gave,
Yeah,
that if we see an anomaly coming up from a firewall perspective,
right.
does Sentinel can remediate within its own framework, or the remediation will take place outside the Sentinel framework?
So if I may take an example of Zscaler, right? Or maybe Azure Firewall, for example, right? So we have capabilities, or the Sentinel framework is built in such a way. We have SOAR capabilities inside it, so we can have a playbook. Let's say, for X IP, we have an alert from firewall. So what you're gonna do is we're gonna block that IP address into the firewall through a logic app or a playbook. So that entire feature, or that entire system, yeah, there are things to be developed and built on, but that falls within the framework of Sentinel, and that's very well possible, as long as the provider talking about, right, that is a SaaS product, or that is available, throughout a API, right? We can very well talk to the API from Sentinel, and then make sure that we can automatically remediate such threats. And then we're gonna talk about that in our example when you look at that. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So coming back to this place detection, right? So when you detect, and then let's say I take a very generic use case. When you see, like, if we take Microsoft product, MCAS is a product, right? That's like raises impossible travel very often. And one of the reasons, because we being in India, most of us being in India, right? What happens? We all use routers for broadband, and then when you restart our router, right, what happens, due to the DHCP nature, our router IP gets reassigned. And what happens, though we're in the same place, right? So our ISP switches. Maybe if I'm in Bangalore, my ISP switches to Chennai or to Delhi, something like that. So it keeps on rotating. And to Azure, what happens, that gives an impression that Samik as a user is trying to log in from multiple places. So that becomes kind of a false positive, right? So that kind of thing, when we turn a detection to investigation, that's what it means, right? Then we understand that what's the behavior. Okay, MCAS or any other product is telling us this is an impossible travel, but when I go to the reality and understand, right, the behavior why it is doing so, it's actually we are investigating an alert because we have the data point, right? We know the fact, and then how are we going to back this up, our investigation. So let's say, we have impossible travel for Samik, because Samik has tried to log in from, in the same day, Samik has tried to log in from Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, right? So how that's going to possible? Maybe because of he has, restarted router for certain reasons, a couple of times in a day, and he got different IP addresses wherein the ISP is from different location. But at the same time, if we try to go to sign in logs and look at the longitude or latitude, like if we try to look at Samik where he is, so we can find he is in Bangalore, based on longitude latitude. So that's kind of a flexibility or feasibility we have in Sentinel, because we have the data, we have the alert all together in same place. So we can relate the data, and then there there are flexibilities and frameworks. We can embed this intelligence to Sentinel itself, so that next time on Sentinel understand, okay, this is a behavior for this country or this location, right? That will not raise more false positive on top of it. So that's basically on the investigation part. That's where it is. Now when we talk to investigate, and then after investigation, let's say we have really found a false positive. For example, Samik has logged in simultaneously from India and US altogether, and that's not, we just had all the data sets, and we made sure that he is not logged in from a VPN, he has not used any custom service, or he has not gone through any Zscaler proxy, for example, right? So it looks like a real threat. So what are you going to do? We have to respond, right? So Sentinel framework also allows us to handle the SOAR capabilities, right, to orchestrate the response. And how we do it? We do it based on Azure PaaS service again. Sorry, Azure service again. It's called Azure Logic Apps, and Azure Logic Apps has, it's like a designer workflow kind of a tool where you can keep writing your business logic, and we have really lot amount of connector to talk to any of the products in Azure and outside Azure, and then give the right command, the right example. So let's say if we consider this case, what we're talking about, Samik has really impossible travel, activity here. So we assume, or the SOC analyst assumes Samik's account is compromised. So we can have a playbook, right, which is going to run, and in one step, it's going to send a mail to Samik's manager. It's going to disable the AD account for Samik, and it's all also gonna take out all the session, kill all the session for Samik. So altogether everything can happen within a single click, right? That's called response. And once we respond, we can also close the incident saying that this is remediated and the user is quarantined. Same thing, right? If we talk about a machine, so if let's say Azure Security Center gives an alert, in this machine we got malware signature, right? We can have another logic app, or we can have another automation which is gonna run and take the machine name input and go to Defender console, and either isolate the machine or start an antivirus scan, something like that. So all these things are a part of Sentinel as of today. So with that, right, if I may summarize, so once we have the data collected from all the sources possible, and we detect what's inside data and what's in this as inside an alert, and then next, once we investigate and come up with our hypothesis, this is right or wrong. So once we have the evidence and we find the cases, either it's a true positive and false positive, based on that, what kind of response we do, that gives a full closure of the full cycle of the security, security analysis. And on top of that, again, once we do this, we have the ways to document, and we have ways to trace out what was happened, go back to the history, and then look at what was the use case and how it was implemented, all those things. So that's like a logical schema, I would say, how Sentinel behaves, or how Sentinel is expected to handle a threat. And with this model, right, this model in place, what happens as and when the time goes, right, maybe as I said, down the line, 6 months, 8 months, or a year, we or our SOC team and Sentinel together gets a maturity of a case, that we know in which cases we need to automatically respond and which case we need to really investigate. So that's also a part of the journey, I would say, and then that comes over time. And with the time we invest to Sentinel, and then with the time we invest with our data sets, right? And the next piece, right, if we talk about the physical framework, how it looks like, so we have basically there are three navigations when you look at the tool, which is very simple. We have general, we have threat management, we have configuration. So entire Sentinel is categorized against these three models, and once we know these three, that's all we need. We don't need to go anywhere outside the console. So with that, before I jump onto the portal, uh, do we have any questions so far? Well, I take that as a no, and let me minimize the slide, and let me jump onto Azure Portal. So with this, right, once we have Sentinel provisioned, so just to give a little bit technical background about Sentinel, what happens is Sentinel is basically a log analytics workspace, right, which is a read-only database. So what happens every time we ingest a new row, there's no update. It's all addition to the log analytics workspace, right? And then once we have the log analytics workspace, we can enable Sentinel on top of it. So it basically applies the security intelligence pack on top of it and then turns on the machine learning feature and stuff like that. But that's all wrapped in a service. So it's all simple. There is no difficult piece about it, right? So if I may go to Azure Sentinel, or maybe we can search Sentinel on the top and then we navigate to Azure Sentinel. So there may be cases, right? Ideally it is recommended that for all of your subscription have, if you look at the latest framework of cloud adoption framework of Azure or something like that. So we are supposed to have single Sentinel instance so that we can ingest all the data across all our subscription to one Sentinel, and that gives us a flexibility to do all our analysis in one place, right? But yeah, in cases if we need to, we can have multiple workspaces as well, right? So if I look at Azure Sentinel and then I see we have just provisioned a workspace with this resource group, and then we have enabled Sentinel on top of it. So if I may click on that, and let me, yeah, now on the left, by the time the right navigation loads, right, I just have a quick look at the left navigation. As we have seen, we have general, we have threat management, and we have configuration. Now, if we need to start from the beginning, right, the way we should do is first we should look at the general, and then we should come back to the configuration and make sure all the configurations are up to the mark the way we want it to be. And then we look at the threat management. This is basically, I would say, no, if first is a general, second one maybe the input for setting up Sentinel, and third one is the response or the output what Sentinel gives us and how we can build more intelligent frameworks around Sentinel or use cases, right? So coming back to the general one, if I may click on overview, which is the default tab, it comes with a filter on top, which is defaulted 24 hours, and it can be extended to 30 days, and again it can be extended to also a custom range, right? And then this is again a predefined, a fixed dashboard what Microsoft offers, wherein we see number of events we have. And because it's like a freshly provisioned environment, so we don't see any alerts, but if we have any alerts and incidents, we're going to see it here. And then on the below we have a little graphic representation. And again on the right hand side, as I was talking about, we really have data anomaly section as well, which is built by Microsoft machine learning. And seeing this itself, we can understand, this is the table which is having usage table is the anomaly table, and then we have a peak here. So just from a common understanding, we have feature to use ML, but that's like a little bit of advanced topic. But before that, we also have malicious event found, and whatever, if we have some alerts in this environment, right, you're going to see in this Bing map by the location stand. So if we look at this page itself here, right, so it also gives incident by status, how many a new active and close. So it's like a standard SIEM solution, and it also gives you overview of the overall Sentinel, how it looks like. Now, the next one is logs. And I'd say this is the most important and most useful, I would say, navigation of entire Sentinel, right? Because logs, let me close this window because this is going to pop up. So logs is basically the query window, right? So we have our raw logs, and this is the place we write our queries, and we can actually tune in and we can do data slicing, dicing, everything you want to do. It has to be, or it can be done from here. And this is one of the places we do it here, right? So that's what I say. Logs is the most meaningful piece here. And as we say, Sentinel internally stores things in tables, and then we have queries to be queried on table. We can have functions. So if I may go to Azure Sentinel, by default, there are watchlist function. And again, for log management, which is from Azure Log Analytics. So these are the things available here. And we can as well filter. So this is about basically the query window. And then if I may just write a simple query that, give me all the tables, it has data points. So what I do is search and distinct, and the language used here is called Kusto query language, that's KQL, which is very similar to SQL. And there are cheat sheets available, which is very easily, you can just do your hands on. And there are Microsoft resources where you can even try this query for free and then keep practicing to upgrade your KQL skills. Now, if I look at the below table, right? So all I'm going to do is for a time range of 24 hours, we just trying to query in the entire Costo database what tables has data, right? So, and these are the tables has data: common security log, we have operation, we have threat intelligence data, we have usage, we have syslog, right? And then we're gonna go to them in a while that what that data contains, right? But before that, I'll just jump on to the news and bad detection, and as you see, right, the basic nature. I'm trying to navigate to a window which is already having something unsaved, so I'm gonna say okay right now, right? And then it's basically a community blog post or the updates, what's coming up in Sentinel, and also you can get started. How do we get started from Sentinel? Like as I said, like we collect data, we create security alert, and we automate orchestrate. So this is a full circle of entire Sentinel procedure. Now, if we may go to configuration, the next thing is data connectors. So as the name itself says data connectors, right? So data connector says that we have data sources to be connected, and then this is a list of 116 connector, which is as of today offered by Microsoft to be injected directly through the configuration pane of Sentinel. But having said that, there are different ways, right, wherein we can ingest data to Sentinel. For example, you have network appliances which is not listed here. We can have a syslog server, basically administrator set up a syslog server or syslog forwarder, wherein all your network, Cisco or any other provider logs gets in there, and then your forwarder pushes that to Sentinel. And then I also have a VM provisioned with me right now. So if time allows, we can have a look at that as well, how that data gets into the Sentinel, right? So, and other than that, we have like Azure services like Azure Function, Azure Logic Apps to ingest data to custom table, right? That's about data connector. And then allow me to refresh it a bit and see if I can reload it. So allow me a moment again. I just refresh the screen, and by the time that refresh, let's see. Just give me one moment, please, here. Okay. So in the meantime, anyone have any questions so far? Please, or anything you think, if you already aware of Sentinel tool, if you want to have a discussion on something very specific, feel free to add. Well, so if I am I audible, guys?
Samik, can you talk a little bit about the playbooks and how many or what kind of playbooks are already available as part of the suite? And
So sorry if you could come again. I think I could hear you fully. If you could repeat the question once again.
sure, Samik, I was talking about if you can share some more details about the playbooks. What kind of
Yeah.
playbooks are already available in Sentinel? And
Mm-hmm.
if we need to make some special playbooks or some customized playbooks, then what is the process? How much time does it take? And what kind of knowledge is required for that?
Yep. Am I still audible, guys?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, Samik, I hope you
Okay,
got my
thanks.
question. Or you want
Yes,
me
I
to?
got your question. No, no worries. I got your question solved. So basically, we are trying to understand what are the playbooks available to be remediated right away off the shelf, and if we really need to write something from the scratch, what it takes to write, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So so just before we jump onto the playbook section, I'll just let me quickly go to this and I'll let Azure load. And there is a GitHub code repository, right, wherein it has like this is a code repository for what we see in Azure, and I have this in my slides as well, but let me paste it in the chat so that we all see it. And in here we should see a folder called playbooks, right? So if I may go there and I would say playbooks. In playbooks, if you see, there is ample list of whatever is available with Sentinel and all. For example, block on-prem AD user, block exchange IP as I was talking about, block AD user, Azure firewall. So all it takes is just we go to that, right? And then we have deploy to Azure button. So once we click on deploy to Azure button, right? What happens if you observe the screen, right? It's gonna take us to the Azure, and then it's gonna build all the it has the ARM template built in the behind the scene, right? And all I need to do is just select the resource group. So if I may say demo, this one, and then it has the name. We just need to create it from here. So I'll try creating and let's see if I'm successful. And by the time that creates, right, so it passed the validation and I'm gonna create it. Now you see the speed of it, right? So with the speed of Azure, right, it's just available there. So this is one way of utilizing off the shelf playbook, and I'll just let it complete the deployment. So other than that, if we really want to start something as a scheduler, or maybe we really want to start some action which is supported by Microsoft Graph API or Zscaler, for example, right, we can build a logic app as a resource from scratch and then keep on adding the stuff after that. So let me just open one of these once this get provisioned, right, so that I can show you over here. Okay, so this is gonna take a while. Let me go to Azure in the meantime. I'll go to Azure in the meantime, and I'll let the other tab complete its deployment. So, and I logged into this Sentinel workspace, and coming to this, we have automation, right? And in automation, we don't have, so we have automation rules and preview. So rules is basically can be configured at analytic rule level. And there are like, if we have multiple steps to be executed, that's something bit advanced than playbooks, but initially what we do is playbooks, right? So let me keep refreshing. Once we see it here, no, okay, it's still deploying, right? So yeah, and if I may go back to the GitHub page, right? So I'll just go back to the same place again called playbooks. And this is the list as you see, right? This is the list of playbooks available. So the list is really high, and anything you can need, right? So I think you can just build it up based on one of these as a template. So for example, you have reset MD domain, restrict defender domain, or maybe reset AAD password. Maybe if you have a requirement like complex, like you have to combine two playbooks, either you can use two of them and then trigger simultaneously, or you can have a new logic app combining both of them together. So coming to this, I go to resource group because my deployment is completed, or I will go back to other screen and also refresh there. And let me go here.
For every
And
playbook to be deployed,
yeah,
we need logic apps.
So Playbook is another name of a logic app with a particular type of trigger. That's all Playbook logic. I mean, Playbook technically is, right? So if I may open this logic app we deployed, right? And then if I may go to logic app designer, so and I'll let it load. And yeah, so you see this, right? When Azure Sentinel incident creation rule is triggered. So this is the piece which makes Azure Logic App as a playbook. That's all the difference is. And again, I'll go to GitHub and go to any of these Logic App. From here, you can straight away deploy things. So there are two triggers, right? Deploy with incident trigger, deploy with alert trigger, whatever works. So if it has to be done for any incident, it has to be alert trigger. If it is an analytic rule, that has to be the incident trigger. Yep. Was I able to answer your
Yeah,
questions?
thank you. Thanks,
Yep.
Samik.
Problem. So then coming back to data connector piece, right? So as I said, like there are data connectors, and if I just try to filter out whatever is connected, right? So I'd go to status, I'd go to select connected only. I'll say okay, and you see I have connected and let me show you how easily this is. All we need to do is just open connector page and then check the checkboxes and save it. And what happens here is because this is a trial one, so we don't have P1, P2. So though these are selected, we don't have logs, then the audit log. So I might need to go to some other one. So common event format, right? This is one more generic way of ingesting data into Sentinel. So as you might know that there are appliances which provides data in common Ceph format, right? And also helps you to ingest formalize the data in a proper manner. So for that, what I have done is, if I may just go back, and I have actually provisioned a Linux server in cloud, which is like a very minimal configuration, right? So if I may try to connect my VM again, and then let me grab the password and log in here, and herein I'll go back to the Sentinel console and say open connector. So all it takes is you provision your log forwarder server or a Linux server. Basically mine is Ubuntu latest version, and we install Python there. And after installing Python, we just need to run this command. So if I may copy this command and paste it to a notepad, and I'm gonna make it visible. So all it is going to do is like it is running a Ceph installer py, and then it's going to GitHub and then picking up one installer, and then it is actually updating the workspace ID so that the agent gets installed in your VM and that can send you the data, right? So once that is installed, yeah, there is a script as well which will tell you that you can run the script to troubleshoot if there is a problem. Now once all those things are set up, right? So if I may go to my this piece, all I'm going to do is go to the syslog server and then paste the data. Yeah. So and all I'm going to do is my so I'll say my demo data. And that's all. So I'm just ingesting forcefully, and there's a logger command where you can do it. But once your setup is productionalized, your forward will automatically be able to send your logs from your syslog server in Ceph format or syslog format to Azure Sentinel. Now, what I mean by that is once this is configured, right? So if I may go back to the logs again, as I spoke earlier, logs is the whole and soul for the entire Sentinel where you can get everything, right? So all I'm gonna type is common security log, and I'd say limit to maybe 20, and I'm gonna run this. And just to save some time and space, I see this right now. If you look at yesterday, I was putting something on various different vendors. So these are the data points you see in Sentinel. So maybe if we give it a minute, if I run it once again, right, we should be able to see the rest of the data set as well, what I just ingested. So if I may do this, and yeah, you see this is what I ingested, right? So it's in Sentinel. So it's as easy as that once I do the setup. And once you have this data, as I said, so it's only a matter of writing rules on top of it, and then you can actually, forward alerts and anything for that matter. And then with the playbook, you can take action on top of that as well. So that's about data connectors. Again, with this, I'll take a pause and wait for any questions you have. Well, again, I take that as a no, and then we proceed once we touched upon the data connectors. Now, if I come back, so as we say, right, when you talk about security, security is not only about the data. So if we have data, for example, we have data for the entire environment, we also need a reference, right, from where we should be comparing it to. So Sentinel also offers certain threat intelligence feed, which will ingest IOCs for that matter. So if I may open one of the data connector, which is taxi, right, I have configured two feeds. Again, this is open source feed. Yep. Sorry if I was disconnected for a moment, but next thing I was talking about is if we look at we look at only data, we also need a reference for IOCs, right? What is a bad IP, what is a bad domain, or what is a bad hash, so that we can write our rules or write queries to make sure that we don't have any such hashes in our environment. So taxi is one of the data connectors. Taxi is one of the data connectors. We provide taxi is one of the data connectors we provide basically, or Microsoft provides, where you can configure and get your TI feeds up and running, right? And it's again a simple configuration. If I may open the connector page, all I need to do is just give certain parameters and your taxi feed gets connected. And if I may scroll down, as I have seen, I have configured two feeds, which is generic feed and again a code COVID-19 feed, right? So that's about it. Data connectors, right? So coming to the next one, we have analytics. So again, I'll just touch base on analytics, which is nothing but query-based system. So we have different type of rules, but we can also create a Microsoft incident creation rule, wherein we get to create alerts out of the Microsoft products like MCAS or identity protections, things like that. We can have a scheduled query as well. Right now, the next one goes as watch list, and as the name says, right, we can add a watch list. For example, VIP users in our tenant, or known IP addresses, and that can be referred for our entire investigation throughout the queries. So if you really want to have a blacklist or a whitelist, both comes under watch list, right? And right now it is supported as a CSV format, and that's all it is. The next part is, as you just talked about, automation, right? So we have, as you see right now, we have one enabled playbooks, and which is here. And the way I have already shown you how to create that. Right. So now, again, another one we have is solution, and which is in preview. But what happens is solution is a packaged provided by Microsoft, right? That with that, once you click on solution, right, it comes with multiple offerings. Like we have the data connector, we have the queries, we have the workbooks all together in this. And the next one is obviously the community tab, wherein we see all the links to community and then how community works. And as I've seen, this is the community you see for Sentinel, right? Now, if I may go to settings, so settings is basically the Sentinel settings, which will show you a little bit of graph on what is the data volume, your ingestion per day. So if you look at, I started from yesterday and the graph is really low, but coming to this, we have really pricing tier available. We can go dedicated based on our data volume, and you can also go pay as you go, right? And as you see, first 90 days retention period is free because you are a Sentinel customer, right? So Microsoft gives you this, but this also, there's a catch to this as well because it is free, right? So oftentimes when we POC, we start ingesting everything we see, right? And then what happens, we end up paying the retention cost of the same data because we also have important data along with that. So we cannot leave, we cannot just for the sake of keeping important data, we also need to pay for the junk data we ingested. So it's always a good idea to be very prepared and plan and deploy Sentinel accordingly. So that's about settings. Now, again, I would go before I go to threat management, I'll take a quick pause here and wait for any questions you have.
Samik, I'm assuming you will spend some time on TI also, right? In detail.
Yeah, I can. Yep, sure. So as you said, right, if I just go to data connectors, so there are two ways to go to data TI, right? So either we can go to, data connectors like taxi, as I have configured for this instance, and then we can configure it. Once we configure taxi, right, and then if I may jump on the threat management, we have threat intelligence tab here on the left hand side. And once we come here, right, we actually see the list of TI feeds available, right, which is already ingested in Sentinel and ready for us to be utilized across. And
Samik, sorry, if you can just talk about a little bit basics from a TI perspective. That if I am a
so
SOC
yeah,
analyst,
yeah.
if I am a SOC analyst and novice, then how will I be able to
Mm,
use the TI feeds which are coming, and how relevant will it be for my environment, my framework, or my
okay.
Azure Sentinel portal?
Okay, so as you say, if you look at open community, right, there are different free TI feeds available to be ingested to Sentinel. Apart from that, there are paid feeds also. So one part is identifying the right vendor and ingesting that into Sentinel. And once we ingest that, right, so I'll just try to click add new. So we'll just understand what a TI feed is. So TI feed is indicator of compromise for one of these categories. Either it can be a domain name, which is malicious, or it can be a file hash, which is malicious, or it can be IP address, which may be reported as a phished IP address or phishing address, something like that. Or it can be a URL where you just, it's a, malware URL or something like that. So once we do that, right, now over the time, and also if I may go to workbook in threat management, and I go to my workbook because it's also in template, just for the demo I saved it as well. So I go to TI and I go to view saved workbook. I get an idea of what exactly in there in my environment and then what do they convey. All right, at least at a basic level, right? So actually we need to play around data connectors, and then once we are done, we need to play with threat intelligence window, and then we need to get to workbooks. So once we are done with analyzing all those, right, now what we need to do is we need to go back to analytics, or if I may go to analytics, for example. So right now there are analytics which will let you know, if I just search for, yeah, if I just search for preview, right? So you see, and then if I may edit this rule real quick. So from a SOC standpoint, what we should do is we can keep running queries and then, keep reading and keep actually cool up, keep messing around the data we have in Azure Sentinel, right? So we can keep messing around the data around that, and then That's how it works.
So
And
there is a TI
if I may
which
just
is
go
shared by
there.
Microsoft also as part of the Sentinel solution, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So is
So
that is
as you see,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I was saying, so there is
yeah, go
a
ahead, please.
yeah, my question is, Samik, that what I understand is that as part of the Sentinel solution, there is a
Yeah,
TI feed which comes into my Sentinel free of cost from Microsoft, right? Now, when the TI
that's
is
right.
being shared,
Yeah,
that TI would be very generic in nature. For example, it will tell you that this domain is compromised, the URLs are compromised, or particular IP address is compromised, and things like that. How will I correlate that TI with my actual infrastructure which is running? Is there a place where I can go and see that, okay, this is the TI, those IOCs maybe in hundreds and thousands which Microsoft has shared, but out of this, there are two which are relevant for me because maybe one of my user is using that IP address, or one of my user went on that IP address,
yeah,
which information I got it, say, from my Azure firewall or Palo Alto firewall as a as a log.
right,
And with, so if you can just
right.
help me with that correlation, I think that will be very interesting for me to know.
Well, so now all the simplest way to do that is keep experimenting with the data based on TI feeds, because the volume of TI feed is, I understand, is really high, because the report is like there are thousands and millions things get reported every day, right? So all we
Exactly,
should do
exactly.
is we need to have workbooks and visual, and then keep visiting the Sentinel data set. For example, if you look at my screen, right, all it is doing, trying to get join between threat intel table and join on your network. Let me just join on your Azure activity, right? This can be similar to Palo Alto firewall or any other data sets. So we should be running the queries and understanding the matches, and then over the time, maybe every day, we can keep observing, or we can build out a workbook. Maybe that will show over a month what was the percentage of matches, or how many occurrences of matches from TI feed within my data set. And that data set, either it can be generic, it can be all across Sentinel, or it can be something as SOC analyst, I decide, okay, I want to do it for firewall, I want to do it for Azure activity, or I want to do it for Office activity, whatever that matters, right? So it's like, trial and error method mostly.
So it will not directly help me correlate that this is the TI which is there, say, for for firewall from related to an IP address, for example. So
Mhm.
will it be able to correlate that, okay, this is the a malicious IP address or a malicious URL which we have seen in the industry, and
Yeah,
then we have seen a log in your logs in
exactly.
your workspace that
Yeah,
one of your user is using this compromised URL. Will it be able to
yeah,
correlate automatically and tell me that this is what we saw in the
yes.
TI and this is what is happening in your organization? So take some action. Now that action can be manual or as the SOAR if I have
Got
already built a playbook for that. Will that able to
got
correlate that, or I have to keep
Yeah.
on hunting and
Nope, 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 nope. So first thing is, as you rightly pointed out, you want to correlate, right? So only thing as a SOC analyst, we need to build out that correlation definition. So for example, with TI, I want to correlate my Azure activity, I want to correlate my Office activity, or I want to correlate my audit logs, right?
correct.
Once I am done, I will be just, will be creating a query like this, and this query can be ported to a workbook, right? And then, or you can actually build out a logic app which will run on a scheduled basis, and then run this query and then send you the results. So there are different ways to adopt it. But first thing is, only thing we need to give input to Sentinel is, okay, what need to be correlated? I mean, what's the definition of your correlation? Once you define that,
So got it.
there are, like, you can use schedulers, you can use workbooks to get visuals.
Got it. So it's
Yep.
a one-time activity which I need to do for correlating the TI which is getting which is shared by Microsoft with my infrastructure.
Exactly. And if you look at workbook section, there are already some pre-built workbook for that. So if I just look
Oh,
at this
wonderful.
TI in workbook, right? So it already correlates your security alerts and TI data. Because I don't have any security alerts, so it doesn't show up anything for me. But that's how it works, basically, to start with.
Got it. Got it, Samik. Thanks. Got it. Yep.
So with that, I'll just quickly complete same thing, like as you say, in the threat management piece, once we have the analytic rule, we have hunting, and workbook is mostly for visual, and we have entity behavior, right? This is like, again, we have to configure this, and this is a little extra chart, but it will basically understand your data pattern and run some ML model behind the scene and give you a total holistic, view of your assets. Maybe it's an IP address, maybe it's an server, maybe it's a user. And threat intelligence, something we just looked at, and the notebook is just like a very deep dive of hunting. So you really have a good maturity in SOC, then you go for notebooks, which is a Python based tool which can, within this you can do data massaging for anywhere in the world, as long as that has a SaaS, or that has an accessible URL, or that has a API. So that's the definition of notebook. And notebook is way more dynamic than what we have seen. So yep. So with that, I'll just try to conclude or summarize. As we see, Sentinel is again cloud SIEM offering, which is having on a single pane of glass, you get all your alerts and data points to be assessed, and it also helps you to remediate within Sentinel without leaving the tool, right? So that these are the trade-offs, and also Microsoft gives you kind of a free privilege to get started to set up your POC without impacting or without giving up your existing SIEM, so that you can understand the power of Sentinel, and then you can use it to automate your so with that, I would, yep. So with that, I'll just take a pause here. If you have any questions. Otherwise, I think we have done our workbook, and yeah, and there are some links available which you can utilize for a further learning. Yep. Not then I will Vignesh, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So, you have anything else to cover,
Yeah.
or are we good?
I think we are good for this session, and then we
Okay.
can maybe plan deeper dive on one of the things Sentinel in our upcoming sessions.